Danielle Mercer was 34 years old when the sedation made her body still, but left her mind sharp enough to hear every word. She'd been hit by a distracted driver 3 days earlier, hospitalized but stable, her husband Theo at her bedside more often than he'd been in months. She thought it was guilt. It wasn't. On the third night, she heard the door open softly, heard a second set of footsteps, lighter, unfamiliar. Then she heard his voice. The same voice that had called her his whole world for 8 years, dropped to a whisper over her hospital bed. "I'm almost free," he said. "After this is settled, it's just us." Danielle didn't move, didn't open her eyes, didn't make a sound. She lay there, perfectly still, while her husband stood inches away, certain she couldn't hear him, certain the woman beside him was the only one who mattered now. He had no idea what settled would actually mean once she got out of that bed, and he had no idea she'd just heard the first piece of it. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The call ended at 8:47 a.m. Danielle knew because she was always watching the clock. She had 3 more calls before noon, a status report due by 2, and a vendor escalation she'd been managing since Tuesday that still hadn't resolved. She pulled off her headset, set it on the desk in its exact spot, and allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of stillness before standing. Her home office was small but precise. A white shelf unit with color-coded binders, a corkboard with project timelines mapped in 3 colors of pin, a single succulent on the windowsill that she watered every Sunday because even small living things deserved consistency. She'd built this room into something that worked. It was the one space in the house that felt entirely hers. She walked out into the kitchen. Theo was at the island, still in his undershirt, scrolling through his phone with one thumb, while the other hand held a piece of toast he hadn't bitten into in several minutes. The television was on, some morning news program playing to no one. There were 2 mugs on the counter. Hers still sat in the cabinet. She moved around him to start the coffee maker. "Good call?" he asked, not looking up. "Good enough. Glenfield's pushing their rollout by 2 weeks. I had to restructure the whole delivery schedule this morning." He turned his phone sideways, set it down, picked it up again. She pulled down her mug. She had already drafted the revised timeline in her head during the call while the client was talking, had already identified the 2 vendors she'd need to contact before lunch, had already written the subject line of the email she'd send at 9:15. That was how her brain worked. Always 2 steps ahead, always building the bridge before anyone else saw the water. She did the same thing with the house. Theo's dry cleaning had been picked up Monday. The fridge had been restocked Wednesday. The dinner with the Halverson couple last month, clients of Theo's he'd wanted to impress, she had made the reservation, confirmed the dietary restrictions, ordered his blazer pressed and waiting on the hook by the door. He'd walked in that night looking polished and easy, the kind of man who never seemed to scramble, and she'd smiled, because that was what she did. She scrambled so he didn't have to. "You're home late tonight?" she asked, pouring her coffee. He exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound, but she knew what it meant. She'd learned all his sounds. "Closing something with Walter. Could be a long one." "Okay." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Should I wait up, or—" "Danielle." He finally looked at her, not warmly, the way you look at something that's making noise when you're trying to think. "I don't know when I'll be done. I'll text you." He hadn't texted her after the last 3 late nights. She hadn't said so. She nodded and looked down at her coffee. He went back to his phone. A few quiet seconds passed. Then, without looking up, he said, "You wearing that dress tonight? For your thing?" "Yes. Why?" He made a small sound, not quite a laugh, something shorter. "Just, you might want to try the black one. It's more forgiving." She stood very still. She knew exactly what he meant. She was not confused about what he meant. She pressed her lips together and looked at the window above the sink, at the pale October light coming through the glass, at the neighbor's maple dropping its leaves one by one onto the empty street. "I'll think about it," she said. He had already stopped listening. She wore the green dress. The work dinner was at a restaurant downtown, 12 people around a long table, and Danielle held the conversation in her hands the way she always did, asking the right questions at the right moments, laughing when it helped, steering the table away from two near arguments with the kind of quiet skill most people never even noticed. Her boss caught her eye once and gave her the small nod that meant, "Good work." She smiled back and reached for her water. At 9:40, she said her goodbyes and walked to her car alone. The drive home took her down Garfield Avenue, past the hardware store and the empty lot that used to be a diner, past the yellow light at the corner of Marsh Street that always took too long. She had the radio on low, something soft and forgettable. She was thinking about the vendor call in the morning. She was thinking about whether she should change the sheets before Theo got home or leave them for the weekend. She was thinking about the word forgiving. She didn't see the other car until its headlights swung hard around the corner, too fast, too wide. Then there was the sound. It was enormous and immediate and final, a crunch of metal that punched through the whole car, and then the world tilted sideways, and her head snapped against the window, and everything went briefly white. Then nothing. Then pain. Her door was caved in. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. Steam or smoke, she couldn't tell, curled up from the hood into the cold night air. She was breathing. She checked that first. In, out, in, out. She tried to move her right arm and felt something sharp and bright shoot up to her shoulder. She stopped moving it. Somewhere outside, someone was shouting. Then footsteps, then a face at her window, a stranger, mouth moving in words she couldn't hear yet through the ringing. She looked straight ahead at the cracked windshield. "I'm okay," she told herself. "I'm still here." The sirens came fast. Red and white light strobed across the inside of the car, turning everything sharp and unreal. 2 paramedics pulled the door open. It groaned, resisted, then gave. And they were calm and efficient, talking to her in low, steady voices. She answered their questions. She knew her name, she knew the date. Her shoulder, she told them, maybe her ribs. One of them said something into a radio. The other put a hand on her arm, the good one, and said, "We're going to get you out now, okay? Nice and slow." She nodded. They lifted her onto a stretcher, and the cold hit her all at once. The night sky above was dark and clear, a few stars visible between the buildings. She stared up at it while they wheeled her toward the ambulance. She was frightened. She could admit that in the quiet of her own chest. Her hands were shaking, and her shoulder was on fire, and she didn't know how bad it was yet, and she was frightened. The ambulance doors swung open. They lifted her inside. White light, warm air, the smell of antiseptic and plastic. The doors closed. She came back slowly, not all at once. First there was warmth, and the low hum of machines, and a dull weight pressing across her chest that wasn't quite pain yet. Then the light, orange-red through her eyelids. Then sound, sharpening like a radio being tuned. A door. Soft footsteps, the squeak of a chair being pulled across a hard floor. She didn't open her eyes. The sedation sat on her like a thick, wet blanket. Her body was heavy, uncooperative, anchored to the bed. But her mind was surfacing, slow and steady, the way it always did when there was something to figure out. She could hear. She could follow. She stayed still. "She's been like this since they brought her in." Theo's voice, close. "Nurse said they gave her something for the shoulder." A pause. Then a second voice, lighter, younger, careful. "Is it serious?" "Bruised ribs, shoulders messed up. She'll be fine." He said it the way you'd say a flight was delayed. Inconvenient, not tragic. Danielle tracked the sounds. 2 sets of breathing. The second one closer than it should have been, right there at the side of the bed, maybe 3 feet away. She could smell something. Expensive. Something floral and precise and completely wrong for a hospital room. Who is she? The thought arrived before she could stop it. She filed it, stayed still. Theo shifted in his chair. The legs scraped softly. "She looks pale," the woman said. "She always looks like that." A dismissive exhale. "She's fine, Carla. Relax." Carla. The name landed somewhere behind Danielle's ribs. She'd heard it before. Not often. He'd mentioned her once, maybe twice, the marketing consultant he'd brought on for the Northfield project. Young, Renata had said once at dinner, with the careful tone women use when they're saying something they've decided not to say. Very young, very polished. Danielle kept her breathing even. Slow in, slow out. She made herself a stone. A long silence stretched between them. Theo's chair creaked. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped 3 times and went quiet. Then he leaned in. She could feel it. The shift in the air, the drop in his voice to something private, something not meant for the room. "I'm almost free." A murmur, barely above a breath, close enough that she could hear the shape of every word. "After this is settled, it's just us." The world did not stop. That surprised her. She had expected something to break inside her, some sudden collapse of the thing she'd been holding together for so long. But instead, everything went very quiet, very clear, settled. Not over, not done. Not the language of a man describing the natural end of a marriage. Settled, like a transaction, like a line item on a list he'd been working through, one by one, in the right order, on his own timeline. She did not move. Carla made a soft sound, something between a sigh and a laugh. "I know," she whispered back. "I know. I'm trying to be patient. Just a little longer." His voice dropped even further. "Trust me. Trust me." 2 years ago she would have laughed at that. Not now. Now she just listened, very still, her hands loose at her sides, her face slack and empty. She was good at this, being invisible when it served her. She'd had practice. They didn't stay long after that. Carla murmured something Danielle couldn't catch. Theo stood. She heard the chair push back, heard him straighten, heard the familiar roll of his shoulders that always came with a certain kind of boredom. He did not touch her, did not take her hand, did not lean down to check on her the way a husband might. He just left. 2 sets of footsteps. The door swung open, letting in a brief wash of hallway noise, a distant intercom, rubber soles on linoleum, and then it closed again, and the room was quiet. Danielle waited. 10 seconds. 20. She counted each one, slow and deliberate, listening to the space around her until she was certain it held nothing but the soft pulse of machines and the faint hiss of the ventilation. Then she opened her eyes. The ceiling was white, institutional, featureless, the kind of ceiling that doesn't ask anything of you. A fluorescent light hummed in its panel above her. The room smelled like antiseptic and the ghost of that perfume, still faint in the air. She stared upward. Her shoulder hurt. Her ribs hurt. There was a needle in the back of her hand and a blood pressure cuff around her upper arm. And somewhere under all of it was a fear she hadn't gotten to yet. The fear that had been building in her chest for months, maybe longer, maybe years, about what she was becoming and what she was worth, and whether she had already been erased so slowly she hadn't noticed. She set it aside. She was not going to cry. She was going to think. "Settled," she said again, silently, to the white ceiling. She turned the word over like a stone, examined both sides. Then she let her eyes close again, and she began. The hospital discharged her on a Thursday. Theo pulled the car around himself. He held the door open, one hand braced on the roof, his face arranged in something that looked like concern. He even took her bag from the nurse, thanked her, smiled the smile he used at client dinners, warm, easy, the kind that made people feel chosen. Danielle watched it all. She settled into the passenger seat, moving slowly because her ribs still pulled when she twisted, and she gazed out the window as the hospital slid away behind them. Theo asked if she was comfortable. She said yes. He turned the radio to something soft and instrumental, a thing he never did, and asked if she was hungry. She said a little. He said he'd pick something up, whatever she wanted, just name it. She named something. He nodded. She turned back to the window. Home looked the same. Of course it did. It had only been 4 days. But she stood in the entryway for a moment after Theo carried her bag in, and something felt different. Not in the house, but in the way she was looking at it. The framed photos on the hall table, the vase she'd picked out at that market in Savannah, the stack of unopened mail she'd been meaning to sort before the accident. She looked at all of it a beat longer than she used to. Then she moved to the couch, lowered herself carefully, and let Theo bring her soup. He sat across from her while she ate. He asked questions. How was the pain? Should she call the doctor? Did she need a pillow for her arm? He said he'd work from home for a few days, make sure she was okay. He said it like it cost him something generous. You don't have to do that, Danielle said. I'm fine, really. I want to, he smiled. You'd do it for me. She held his eyes for just a moment. Of course, she said. She ate her soup. She said it was good. She gave him 2 days. 2 days of the performance. Him solicitous, her grateful, both of them moving through the house like actors who had memorized the same script from different productions. She rested when he watched. She moved when he didn't. She noticed things. His phone, face down on every surface now, a habit that was new, or newly obvious. The way he angled the screen when she came into a room, small, smooth, a flick of the wrist that looked like nothing until you'd seen it 17 times. The home office at the end of the hall, a room that had been mostly storage since they moved in, boxes of his old paperwork and a desk he'd never used. He was in it now, door closed, twice before she was even out of bed. She didn't try the handle. Not yet. She was learning the shape of what he was doing before she touched it. On the 4th day home, he went to a showing. He announced it at breakfast. Back by 6, he said. Call if you need anything. He kissed her forehead, another new gesture, careful and weightless. And then he was gone, and the house was quiet, and Danielle set down her coffee cup and got up from the kitchen table. She sorted the mail. It had piled up on the counter while she was gone, rubber-banded in a loose bundle the neighbor must have brought in. Mostly ordinary things, bills, a catalog, a notice from the HOA. She worked through it methodically, the way she worked through anything, one piece at a time. Near the bottom of the stack, tucked between a credit card offer and an electric bill, was a manila folder. It wasn't sealed. It had probably fallen from somewhere else and been swept into the pile without a second thought. She recognized Theo's handwriting on the tab, just an abbreviation, 2 letters, and she opened it the way she opened everything else. Steady, unhurried. The papers inside were dense with legal language, the kind that blurred if you didn't know what to look for. Refinancing documents, a property she recognized, the Halcourt Street rental they'd bought together 3 years ago, the one she'd signed alongside him at a title company downtown. Her name had been on that deed. Her name was not on these papers. She read the top sheet twice, then the second. Then she turned to the third, which outlined the structure of something called Mercer Capital Holdings, LLC, registered 6 months ago, in a state she didn't live in, with Theo listed as the sole member. Underneath that was a schedule of assets. She recognized every one of them. She stood at the kitchen counter and read the entire folder without moving. When she finished, she set it down exactly where she'd found it. Then she went to the bedroom, reached into the back of the nightstand, and pulled out her personal phone, the one she used for work, not the one on their shared plan. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in the quiet afternoon light, and found Sandra's number. Sandra picked up on the second ring. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "I need your help." Danielle kept her voice low and even. "Not the kind where you tell me it's going to be okay. The other kind." A pause, brief. Sandra understood the difference. "What did you find?" "Documents. An LLC. Refinancing paperwork with my name removed from a property I own." She paused. "He's been moving things. I need to know how far." Sandra's voice shifted. All business now. "Send me everything you've got. We're not guessing on this." Sandra's kitchen table was the kind that had seen real work, not the decorative kind of table in a nice house, the kind with a bowl of fruit no one ate and candles lit on weekends. Sandra's table had a legal pad, 2 coffee mugs, a lamp pulled close from the corner, and a charging cable that snaked across the edge. It was a working surface. Danielle had always liked that about it. She spread the photographed documents flat between them. 12 pages, shot carefully on her phone in the 20 minutes Theo had been in the shower that morning. Good angles, clear text, nothing blurred. Sandra didn't say anything for a long time. She read the way forensic accountants read, slowly, tracking something invisible to everyone else, a thread only she could see. "Okay," she said finally. She pulled her laptop closer. "Okay." That was all. She started typing. Over the following 4 days, Danielle fed Sandra everything she could find. She moved through her own house like a stranger, careful, quiet, and patient. When Theo left for the office, she went to the home office first. When he came home, she was back on the couch with a book, ankles crossed, unhurried. The desk drawer had a lock, but it was old. It used the same key as the filing cabinet beside it. She'd noticed that years ago and filed it away without knowing why. She knew why now. She photographed what was inside. Then she replaced it exactly as she'd found it, margins lined up, papers in the same order, the slight diagonal angle of the top folder preserved. She sent everything to Sandra in batches. Sandra acknowledged each one with 2 words, "Got it." Nothing more. No alarm in the messages, no drama, just the quiet efficiency of someone who treated a crisis like a problem to be solved. On the 5th evening, Danielle drove to Sandra's apartment. Sandra was already at the table when she arrived, laptop open, the lamp burning against the dark outside the window. There were 2 mugs again. She'd made coffee without being asked. Danielle sat down. Sandra turned the laptop screen toward her. "Your husband and Walter Briggs have been pulling money out of their client escrow accounts," Sandra said. Her voice was flat and clinical, the way she got when the numbers were serious. "Not sloppy, not obvious, but steady. Small transfers, different amounts, staggered timing. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing." She paused. "It's been going on for at least 14 months. Danielle looked at the screen. Columns of figures, transfer dates, account numbers she didn't recognize. "The money moves into the LLC," Sandra continued. "From there, it splits. Some of it gets parked, some of it," she scrolled down, "gets distributed out again, as payments." "Payments to who?" Sandra pulled up a second window, a set of invoices, clean and professional looking, with a logo in the upper left corner she didn't immediately recognize. Then she read the company name, Voss Creative Consulting. The air in the room stayed exactly the same temperature. Danielle felt something tighten behind her sternum, not surprise exactly, something colder than surprise. "Carla," she said. "Carla." Sandra nodded. 17 invoices over 13 months, billed to the firm. She pointed at the screen. Marketing services, campaign strategy, brand materials. Look at the line items. Danielle looked. "Now look at this." Sandra pulled up a side-by-side comparison she'd already prepared, an internal summary of the firm's actual marketing output, pulled from public filings. Their website hasn't changed in 2 years. They've run 3 print ads total, 1 mailer campaign. She tapped the invoices. None of that matches anything billed here. The deliverables listed on these invoices don't correspond to a single thing that actually got produced. Danielle sat back. She thought about the hospital room. She thought about Carla standing at the foot of her bed, one hand resting on the rail like she had every right to be there. She thought about Theo's whisper, "I'm almost free," and the words settled, which had bothered her then in a way she hadn't fully understood yet. She was starting to understand it now. "She knew," Danielle said. It wasn't a question. Sandra pressed her lips together. Maybe she knew exactly what she was part of. Maybe she just didn't ask questions about money that came easy. She shrugged once, a small, precise motion. Either way, her name is on every invoice. Her account received the transfers. That's what matters when someone starts looking. Danielle looked at the dates. 13 months. The invoices had started 3 months before she'd noticed Theo pulling away, before the late nights, before the comments about her weight, her age, the way she'd settled, his word, applied to her like it was a fact she should simply accept. He had already been building his exit while she was still trying to hold the marriage together. She thought about all the minutes she'd spent adjusting herself, making herself smaller, quieter, less. She picked up her coffee mug, took a slow sip, set it back down. Sandra watched her. Then Sandra closed her laptop, and the soft click of it was the only sound in the room. "This is bigger than a divorce, Danielle," she said. "This is fraud." 2 weeks is a long time to smile at a man you've stopped believing in. Danielle got good at it anyway. She moved through the house the same way she always had. Coffee made by 7, the mail sorted by type, dinner on the table at a reasonable hour when she got home before him. She kept her routines intact, not out of habit now, but out of purpose. Routine was cover. Routine was the thing that kept Theo comfortable, and a comfortable Theo was a careless one. He was getting very careless. It started small, the way it always did with him. A Tuesday morning, her in a gray blouse at the kitchen counter, him reading something on his phone. She'd asked him whether he wanted chicken or fish for dinner. He looked up, looked at her. Not her face, at her. A slow, assessing look she recognized from somewhere older and worse. "Doesn't matter," he said. "You should probably watch the carbs either way." He said it lightly, almost kindly, the way you'd tell someone their tag was showing. Then he went back to his phone. Danielle poured her coffee and said nothing. She thought, 14 months. She thought about the invoices Sandra had pulled up, all those tidy rows, all that money traveling from one account to another, while she'd been right here, trimming her portions, wearing longer shirts, wondering what she was doing wrong. She set her mug down without rattling it. "I'll figure it out," she said pleasantly. There was another one on Friday. They'd been passing in the hallway, both heading to opposite parts of the house, and he'd glanced at the photo on the wall, the one from their 4th anniversary, the trip to Savannah. Her hair was down. She was laughing at something out of frame. "You looked good there," he said, past tense, deliberate as a pin. He kept walking before she could respond. Danielle stood in the hallway a moment after he was gone. She looked at the photo. The woman in it was happy in a way that made her chest feel strange. Not because it was gone, but because that woman had no idea what was being built around her while she laughed. "You looked good there." She filed it away with the rest. The visit to Renata had been planned for a Wednesday, worked into the calendar like any other appointment. Theo's mother lived 20 minutes north in the kind of house that announced itself. Brick front, shaped hedges, a welcome mat that had never needed replacing because no one came and went carelessly enough to wear it out. Renata kept her home the way she kept herself, orderly, presentable, and precisely controlled. She was pleased when Danielle called ahead. She was always pleased when Danielle made the effort. It confirmed something Renata needed to believe about the family she'd built. Danielle brought a small box of the butter cookies Renata liked. She sat at the kitchen table and accepted tea she didn't need and asked about the neighbor's garden renovation and listened to the answer with her whole face. Renata was easy to draw out. She didn't get visitors who asked questions the right way. They talked about small things for the first half hour. That was fine. You didn't rush toward what you needed. You made the other person feel like they were just talking. It happened naturally, the way real things do. They'd been on the subject of time, how fast it moved, how certain years folded into each other before you noticed. Renata was talking about her late husband, how he'd changed after 40 without warning. "Some men do that," Renata said, both hands around her cup. "They get restless. They start looking around at what they don't have instead of what they do." She said it with the practiced sadness of someone who had rehearsed a version of this thought for years. "It's hard to see it coming," Danielle said, her voice gentle and open. "Even when you're close to someone." Renata's gaze drifted to the window. Something crossed her face, not guilt exactly, but the shadow guilt leaves behind. "Theo's first wife didn't see it coming either." The words came out quiet, almost careful, but they came out. By the time she knew something was wrong, most of it was already done. He'd moved things around for over a year before she noticed. She paused. She set her cup down. She blamed herself afterward, thought she'd let herself go, let things get stale. Renata's mouth pulled at the corner. I never told her she was wrong to notice that, but it wasn't why. The kitchen was very still. What was the first wife's name? Danielle asked, soft, conversational. Renata blinked, seemed to return from somewhere. Marie, she said. Then she picked up her cup again, and whatever door had briefly opened drew itself mostly shut. She moved away eventually. Better for her, I think. Danielle nodded slowly. She thought about Marie, who had blamed herself. She thought about a year of careful maneuvering. She thought about the invoices, the LLC, the whispered words in the hospital room. Not impulsive, not even close. She reached for a butter cookie and took a small bite. He's lucky to have you looking out for him, she said warmly. Renata smiled and poured her more tea. Danielle thanked her at the door 20 minutes later, kissed her cheek, and meant none of it in the way Renata believed she did. She walked to her car, got in, closed the door, sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. Theo had done this before. Built the exit first, then made the woman feel like the exit was her fault. A year of preparation. Same architecture, different wife. She started the car. Her hands were steady. The text came on a Thursday morning while Danielle was eating toast over the kitchen sink. Hi, Danielle. I know this is unexpected. I'd like to meet, just the two of us, if you're open to it. I think it would help to talk. Carla. Danielle read it twice. Then she set her toast down, washed her hands, and typed back. Sure. One works for you. Carla picked a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral ground, she probably thought. Somewhere bright and public and full of ambient noise. The kind of place where nothing too raw could happen between two women in good coats. Danielle arrived 2 minutes early and chose a table facing the door. She watched Carla walk in. 29 years old and every inch of it on display. Not cheaply, but deliberately. She wore a fitted camel blazer over dark jeans and carried a slim leather bag that probably cost more than Danielle's first car payment. Her hair was the kind of effortless that took real effort. She moved through the coffee shop like she'd already decided what the room thought of her. She spotted Danielle and smiled, warm, almost sympathetic. There it is, Danielle thought. Thank you for coming, Carla said, settling into the chair across from her like she owned it. She set her bag down neatly, crossed her ankles. I wasn't sure you would. I figured it was worth a conversation, Danielle said. Their drinks came. Carla wrapped both hands around her cup. She started carefully. A few minutes of softened language. I never wanted to hurt anyone, and these things are complicated, and I have a lot of respect for what you and Theo built. The words had the texture of something rehearsed in a car mirror. Not quite an apology, more like the outline of one. Danielle listened with her face open and still. Then Carla shifted. It was subtle, a small lift of the chin, a change in the air pressure of the conversation. I think part of why this has been so hard, she said, is that no one wants to admit when a relationship has just run its course, when people grow in different directions. She tilted her head, the picture of careful honesty. Some relationships outgrow people, you know? It doesn't mean anything went wrong. It just means it ran its course, Danielle said. Exactly. Carla nodded like Danielle had said something wise. And honestly, I think on some level you knew. I think you've known for a while. She said it gently, but the gentleness was the blade. You should have seen this coming. This was always going to happen to you. Danielle picked up her coffee. Maybe, she said. Carla seemed pleased with that. The slight tension in her shoulders released. She was getting what she'd come for. Not to clear the air. To confirm that Danielle was already accepting, already stepping back, already making room. She kept talking. Theo just needs space to breathe, Carla said after a while. He's been carrying so much. The business pressure, everything else. She shook her head, performed a small sigh. We've actually been talking about getting away for a bit, just to decompress, once everything's settled. She smiled, and behind the smile was the point. Once you're handled, once the exit is complete. When are you thinking? Danielle asked. Easy, curious, the way you'd ask about a vacation. Carla didn't hesitate. 3rd week of October. He found a place in Sonoma. We've been looking forward to it. 3rd week of October. Danielle took a small sip of her coffee. She thought, 5 weeks. They talked for another 20 minutes. Or rather, Carla talked. She mentioned a new client she just landed, something in commercial real estate. She mentioned the firm's work picking up, how the consulting side had been strong lately. The consulting money's been good, she said with a small, comfortable laugh. Honestly, better than I expected this year. She said it the way people talk about a bonus they didn't fully earn, but accepted without asking too many questions. Breezy, slightly proud. The words of someone who had decided that easy money was simply good luck. Danielle smiled. That's great, she said. It's good when the work pays off. Carla nodded and steered back to herself, and Danielle let her. They parted outside on the sidewalk. Carla touched Danielle's arm briefly, a practice gesture, warm but closing, the punctuation of a conversation that had gone the way she'd planned. I hope we can both move forward, Carla said. I think we will, Danielle said. She watched Carla walk toward her car, straight back, easy stride, a woman who believed she had just handled something. Danielle turned and walked the other direction. She got in her own car, closed the door. The street noise dropped away. She pulled out her phone and opened Sandra's name. We have a deadline now. I'll explain tonight. She hit send. Then she set the phone on the passenger seat and sat for a moment in the quiet. 3rd week of October. 5 weeks. It was enough. Sandra was already at the kitchen table when Danielle arrived. The laptop was open. A legal pad sat beside it, half a page filled with Sandra's tight, precise handwriting. 2 mugs of tea steamed near the edge of the table, and the overhead light made everything feel clean and serious, like a room where real decisions happened. Sit, Sandra said, not unkindly. Danielle sat and told her everything. Carla's blazer, the rehearsed sympathy, the way she'd tilted her head and said some relationships outgrow people, like she was delivering a verdict. And the trip. 3rd week of October, Sonoma, 5 weeks from now. Sandra listened without interrupting. When Danielle finished, Sandra wrote the date down at the top of the legal pad and circled it. Okay, Sandra said. Then we move on that morning. Sandra opened the laptop and pulled up the audit file. She'd been working it for weeks, tracing numbers through documents that were designed to blur into each other, to look like normal business activity unless you knew exactly where to press. She pressed in all the right places. It's clean, Sandra said. The documentation is clean, I mean. The fraud isn't. She turned the screen so Danielle could see. Here's the escrow account. Here's where the funds were supposed to go. She clicked to another tab. Here's the LLC. Here's where they actually went. The numbers sat there, plain and ugly. And Carla? Danielle asked. Sandra pulled up a separate column of invoices. Marketing consulting fees, billed monthly to Theo's firm. The amounts were high. The deliverables, when Sandra had cross-referenced them against the firm's actual project records, were thin. Vague descriptions, no drafts, no campaigns that matched the billing dates. She either knew exactly what she was doing, Sandra said, or she cashed checks without asking a single question. She looked at Danielle. Legally, it doesn't matter much which one. The invoices are tied to the same accounts as the escrow diversion. Her name is on the paper trail. Danielle thought about Carla's voice in the coffee shop. The consulting money's been good. Better than I expected. The small, comfortable laugh. She knew, Danielle said. Sandra nodded once and said nothing more about it. They worked through the rest of the evening building the 4 instruments. The first was the divorce filing. Sandra walked Danielle through what her attorney had already drafted, including a motion for an emergency asset freeze, a legal mechanism that, once filed, would lock every account and property tied to the marriage before Theo could move another dollar. They'd timed it carefully. The freeze would go in the morning Theo planned to leave for the airport. The second was a confidential complaint to the State Real Estate Licensing Board. Danielle had written it out once already, and now she read through it again at the table, adjusting 2 sentences. It named Theo, it named Walter Briggs, and it attached a summary of Carla's invoice irregularities as a connected pattern within the same firm. Sandra had formatted the supporting documents cleanly, the kind of packet a licensing investigator could follow without confusion. "Once that lands," Sandra said, "the board opens a file. That's automatic. It doesn't matter what Theo says after." The third was a meeting request to Walter Briggs, a short email, professional and vague, requesting a private conversation about the firm's financials. No specifics, just enough to make a man who already knew he'd done something wrong understand that someone else knew, too. "He'll show up," Sandra said. "He'll show up fast," Danielle said. The fourth was quieter. Danielle had spent 2 evenings drafting careful notes to 3 people in the local development and marketing circle. Not public accusations, nothing that could be called a smear, just enough. A mention that Carla's consultancy had come up in connection with a compliance review. A gentle suggestion that due diligence might be worth running before signing any new contracts. In their world, that kind of whisper moved like smoke, fast, and impossible to see until it was already everywhere. She addressed the last one and set it aside. Sandra closed the laptop. The legal pad between them was now completely full. "You have everything," Sandra said. She said it quietly, like a fact rather than a comfort. "I know," Danielle said. She drove home just after 10. The house was dark except for the light Theo always left on above the stove, which he did out of habit rather than consideration. He was already asleep. She could hear the even sound of his breathing from the doorway of the bedroom. She didn't go in. She went to the small desk in the spare room and opened the top drawer to look for a pen. Her hand found something else first. A white plastic bracelet. Hospital issued. Her name printed on it in small black letters. Mercer, Danielle. A date. A room number. She held it for a moment. She remembered the ceiling tiles, the sound of Theo's voice, low and certain. "I'm almost free." She set the bracelet back in the drawer. Then she found the pen, capped it, and set it on top of the papers she'd carried to her attorney in the morning. She turned off the light and went to bed. Walter Briggs kept his office on the 4th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place with a receptionist who smiled without warmth and chairs in the waiting area that cost more than they looked. Danielle had been here once before, years ago, for a firm holiday party. She remembered Theo steering her through the room by the small of her back, introducing her to people and then talking over her when she tried to speak. She signed in at the front desk and sat down. She didn't fidget. She set her bag on her lap and waited. Walter came out 3 minutes early. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of tan that came from golf rather than vacations. He shook her hand firmly and smiled the way men like him smiled at wives. Pleasant, slightly distracted, already calculating how long this would take. "Danielle," he said, "come on back." She waited until he sat down behind his desk. Then she opened her bag and placed the audit packet in front of him. It was 41 pages. Sandra had bound it cleanly, tabbed by section. The cover page listed nothing but the firm's name and a date range. Walter looked at it, but didn't reach for it yet. "What is this?" he asked. His tone was still easy, still in charge. "An audit of the firm's escrow accounts going back 18 months, Danielle said, along with a review of the consulting invoices billed by Carla Voss's company during the same period. A pause. Small, but she caught it. He picked up the packet. She let him read. She sat straight in the chair and kept her hands folded in her lap and said nothing while he turned pages. His expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened somewhere around page 9, where Sandra had laid out the diversion pattern in plain columns. Numbers in, numbers out. A clear line connecting both. He flipped to the tab marked Consulting Invoices. He spent longer there than anywhere else. When he set the packet down, the easy smile was gone. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I had someone look," Danielle said. He was quiet for a moment. She could see him doing the calculation behind his eyes. Not, "Is this true?" He already knew whether it was true. The calculation was different. It was, "How exposed am I, and how fast do I need to move?" "Danielle," he said, and his voice had shifted. "Careful now. I want you to understand that I wasn't aware of the full scope." "Walter," she said, gently, "I'm not here to talk about what you were aware of. I'm here because your name is on the escrow accounts, and mine is on a licensing complaint that gets filed this morning, whether we have this conversation or not." She held his gaze. "I thought it was fair to let you read it first." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached forward and pressed the intercom button on his desk phone. "Lisa," he said, "hold everything. Get me Marcus on the compliance line." She was back in her car by 9:45. Sandra called at 10:12. "Freeze is filed," she said. "Confirmed with the court clerk. And the licensing complaint landed. I watched the submission go through." "Good," Danielle said. "Walter moves fast," Sandra said. "His compliance team just flagged Carla's contract internally. It's already in their system." Danielle had known he would. Men like Walter Briggs didn't survive as long as they had by being slow when their licenses were threatened. He would cooperate completely. He would hand over everything that helped his own case. And in doing so, he would dismantle Theo's from the inside. She drove home under a gray October sky, the trees along the road going pale yellow at the edges. By noon, Sandra had forwarded her a short reply from one of the 3 industry contacts Danielle had quietly reached out to earlier that week. A 2-line email. "Heard the name come up. We're going to hold off for now on the engagement. Thanks for the heads up." That was one. The second contact sent nothing, but Sandra had a friend in that office who confirmed the new contract with Carla's consultancy had quietly been put on pause. 2 inquiries gone. Across the city, Theo was at his office. Danielle knew his schedule. She knew he'd be there until 3, maybe 4, making calls, signing off on the Sonoma travel details, running out the last few days of a life he thought he had fully planned. She didn't think about him for long. At 2 in the afternoon, she made a cup of coffee and sat down at her kitchen table. The house was quiet. The afternoon light came through the window above the sink in a long, flat rectangle, stretching across the tile floor. On the table in front of her sat a single folder. Inside was a copy of the asset freeze filing, a copy of the licensing complaint, and Sandra's note confirming both had been received. Everything was filed. Everything was irreversible. She wrapped both hands around her mug and waited for Theo to come home. Theo came through the front door at 6:14. Danielle heard his keys hit the entry table too hard. She heard him pull off his jacket and not hang it up. She heard the particular rhythm of his footsteps, quick, flat, the kind of steps that meant his mind was already somewhere else. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. Renata was sitting at the table across from Danielle, a cup of tea in front of her, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked up at her son, but didn't smile. Theo looked at his mother, then at Danielle, then at the folder on the table. "What is this?" he said. His voice was still in charge, still reaching for easy. "Sit down, Theo," Danielle said. It wasn't a request, exactly. It wasn't a command either. It was something quieter than both. He heard it, and something in his face shifted. Not fear yet, but the first edge of it. He sat. Danielle didn't open the folder right away. She wrapped her hands around her mug the same way she had been all afternoon and looked at her husband across the table. "You came to the hospital," she said. "The second night. Do you remember?" Theo blinked. "Of course I remember." "You brought Carla." A beat of silence. His jaw tightened. "Danielle, you stood next to my bed," she said, "and you whispered to her. You said, 'I'm almost free. After this is settled, it's just us.'" The color shifted in his face. Not much, just enough. "I heard every word," Danielle said. "I wasn't as sedated as you thought." He opened his mouth. She could see the mechanics of it starting, the reassembly, the pivot, the "you misunderstood, you were on medication, you were half asleep." He was good at this. She had watched him do it for years, take a true thing and soften it until the person holding it started to wonder if they'd imagined it. She slid the folder across the table before he could speak. "Open it," she said. He opened it. The first page was the asset freeze. He stared at it for a long moment. His eyes moved fast across the text, and she watched him find his own name, find the LLC, find the court stamp in the upper right corner confirming receipt. "This is," he started. "Filed this morning," Danielle said. "Confirmed." He turned to the next page, the licensing complaint. His name, Walter's name, the escrow accounts, 18 months of figures laid out in clean columns. "Walter wouldn't." "Walter already did," she said. "He pulled your project funding this morning. He flagged Carla's contract to his compliance team before 10. He's cooperating with the review." Theo set the papers down. He looked up at her, and then the pivot came. Not the soft version, the harder one. His voice dropped into the register he used when he wanted to make her feel small. "You have no idea what you've actually done here. You don't understand how this business works. These are just—" "There are 41 pages of documentation," Danielle said, "prepared by a forensic accountant, already in the hands of the licensing board, already attached to the asset freeze." She said it the same way she'd said everything else. Level. Quiet. "There's nothing to explain away." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his mother. A last reach. The familiar one. "Mom," he said. His voice shifted again. Younger now. Softer. "You understand how these things get distorted. You know Danielle has been—" "Theo!" Renata's voice was not loud. It was very tired. She looked at her son the way someone looks at a thing they've been carrying for too long. "Don't." He dated. "You did this before," Renata said. "With Claire." The name landed on the table like something heavy. The same LLC structure, the same timing, the same story afterward about how she let herself go, how the marriage had already been dead. She paused. "I didn't say anything then because I told myself it was private, that it wasn't my place." She looked down at her tea. "I was wrong about that." "That is completely— I was there, Theo," she said simply. "I saw the paperwork the first time too. I just didn't ask what it was." The kitchen went very quiet. Theo looked from his mother to Danielle and back again. His mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing left to reach for. No version to offer, no explanation that could pull the filings back out of the system, no way to make Walter uncooperative again, no way to unknow what Renata had just said out loud for the first time. The plan he had been building for over a year, the LLC, the trip, the clean exit, was gone. Not unraveling, already gone, filed into systems that didn't give things back. He sat very still. Danielle looked at him for a moment, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the quiet recognition of someone who had finished a long piece of work and could finally set it down. Then she pushed back her chair, stood, and walked out of the kitchen. She left Theo sitting at the table with his mother, the folder open in front of him, the house silent around him. The news moved fast. By Thursday, 2 days after the kitchen confrontation, Theo's firm had been formally flagged by the licensing board. By Friday morning, the escrow investigation had been handed to a state financial crimes unit. Danielle read the confirmation email from her attorney over her second cup of coffee, sitting at the same kitchen table where everything had ended. She forwarded it to Sandra without a word. Sandra replied with a single line, "You did that." Danielle set her phone face down and finished her coffee. She reached out to Carla on Saturday, not through a lawyer, not through a mutual contact, a direct message, short and plain. "I'd like to meet. One conversation. You pick the place." Carla took a day to respond. When she did, she chose the same coffee shop from before. Danielle noticed that. There was still something in Carla that wanted the home field advantage, even now. She was already seated when Danielle arrived. She had dressed carefully, a structured blazer, hair down, a posture that said she was still composed, but her hands were wrapped too tightly around her cup, and her eyes moved to the door a half-second too fast. Danielle sat down across from her and didn't order anything. "I wanted to tell you directly," Danielle said, "because you extended me the same courtesy." Carla held her chin level. "Tell me what, exactly?" "The compliance review is formal now. It's not a whisper anymore." Danielle kept her voice even, almost conversational. "Your invoicing pattern, the ones billed to Theo's firm with no matching deliverables, has been submitted as part of the escrow fraud documentation. It's attached to a licensing board complaint with your consultancy named." Something moved through Carla's face, just briefly. "That's a legal matter," Carla said. "My attorney has the same paperwork I'm describing," Danielle said. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm just telling you what already exists." She paused. "The referral network you've been working through, the development and marketing contacts in this city, they've seen the compliance flag. Not from me directly. It travels on its own. You know how that works." Carla's jaw shifted. She did know how it worked. She had used that same network for years, the same quiet web of industry introductions and recommendations and carefully managed reputation. She had built her consultancy on it. "The 3 clients you had lined up for next quarter," Danielle continued, "have already pulled back. I didn't call them. I didn't have to." Carla set her cup down. Her hands were steady, but only just. "So what do you want from me? An apology?" "No," Danielle said simply. "I don't want anything from you. I came because you sat across from me in this exact coffee shop and told me I should have seen all of this coming, that some marriages outgrow people." She let that sit for a moment. "I just wanted to close that loop." Carla looked at her. For the first time since the day they'd met, there was no angle in her expression, no calculation. Just a woman looking at another woman across a small table, stripped of everything she'd thought was working in her favor. She didn't say anything. Danielle stood, picked up her bag, and walked out. The months that followed were quiet in the way that only comes after a very long noise finally stops. Theo's investigation stretched through the fall. His firm dissolved in October. Not dramatically, no single moment of collapse, just a slow emptying out as partners withdrew and contracts were suspended and the office lease went unpaid. He moved out of the house in September, before the divorce was finalized, and into a short-term rental Danielle heard about only through her attorney. She didn't ask for details. The divorce settled in November. The asset freeze had held everything in place long enough for Danielle's legal team to document what was hers, what was marital, and what had been moved without her consent. She walked away with her share, clean and court-confirmed, her name on it and no one else's. Carla dissolved her consultancy in August. By September, she had left the city. Danielle didn't track where she went. She heard through someone, months later, that Carla had taken on smaller marketing contracts somewhere in another state, lower profile, for businesses that didn't ask about her previous work. Danielle filed that information away and never thought about it again. She accepted the senior role at the new firm in December, her own office, her own clients, no one else's image to manage. The following October, a full year after the kitchen table, Danielle was walking to her car after a site meeting when she saw Theo. He was crossing the same parking lot from the other direction. He looked smaller than she remembered, though his height hadn't changed. His jacket was a little too big now, or maybe it always had been. He was walking with his eyes on his phone. He looked up. He saw her. Danielle met his eyes. One moment, no longer. There was nothing in her chest, no pull, no anger, no grief, just the flat recognition of a person she used to know standing in a parking lot in the afternoon light. She looked away first, not because she owed him the avoidance, simply because she was already done. She walked to her car, unlocked it, and drove away. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!